Hi everybody. My name is Sionice Phillips. I work for Barclays Bank. I am a BUK diversity and inclusion lead, which essentially means that I lead on the diversity and inclusion agenda for the whole of Barclays UK, which sounds quite impressive. It's not. It is just one of very, very many cogs that make the organisation spin around. I've worked for them for 14 years after starting in the role as a cashier. And what I wanted to do today really was to kind of bring some of my experiences, my career experiences, but I also thought I would, seeing as you are a university, potentially try and give you some insight into kind of the kind of things that you really need to be thinking about when you step into the professional world, and the kind of things that I wish that I'd known earlier on in my career. So, as well as being a champion for diversity and inclusion in my day job, I'm also part of our LGBT Networks Executive Committee, and I lead on the plus pillar for the committee. The reason I do this is because I am an openly transgender woman, and I wanted to give you some insight into my experiences as a transgender person of a certain age. Ria has already highlighted that I am only 21 years old. However, that is not the truth. I am 40 and I transitioned at the age of 17. So I wanted to really give you some insight into kind of what the world felt like in those days, back in the olden days, and I wanted to give you kind of some insight into the kind of things that have shaped me and how now that is impacting me in my career. I feel like it's important to give a bit of a trigger warning at the beginning because there are some of my experiences that may be distressing for you. So please just kind of be prepared. So the beginning of my journey starts a long time ago, in 1981 when I was born, and I pretty much kind of stood out from a very, very young age for being different. And coming from a very small town called Grimsby, I have to be very careful about slagging off Grimsby too much because my cousin's daughter, Ria, is on the call, and a lot of my family still live there. But this is normally where I would go on about how kind of backwards the town is. But essentially, the problem with coming from a small town in kind of those ages is that it wasn't very open-minded, and unfortunately what that meant is that because I was standing out, not only did the children really notice that I was standing out, but so did the parents. And back in those days when the parents noticed that a child was different, unfortunately they tended to keep their children apart. So I was really kind of isolated from a really, really young age. And what that did is it really kind of highlighted to me the difference that was there in me. I didn't really know how I was different, but I knew that I was. And some really sort of key examples of where things like on show and tell, I would bring my washing machine to school, for instance, and as a young boy showing the other children in the class their washing machine, ultimately, I was highlighting myself as very, very different. So when I then started going to senior school, the kind of the isolation and the bullying really started to ramp up, and essentially I'd spent a few years trying to get time away from school by either faking illnesses or actually causing them. So as a 15-year-old child, I was doing things like smashing myself into a wall to cause bruises so I couldn't go to school. I even dropped a television, a portable television, on my leg. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to break my leg so I didn't have to go to school because I was being so badly bullied. And the problem that I was facing is that it wasn't just a few children in the school. It was all of the children in the school. And after one particularly bad day, after being attacked on the way to school and attacked on the way back from school, I had spent the evening alone. My mum was a single parent and was working in a takeaway. And I was so devastated at not coming to terms with who I was, but coming to terms with the way that the world was treating me for who I was. And because I was experiencing this awful isolation and then feeling like I was a really nice person, but everybody else hated me, I fell into the statistics. And the statistics state that over half of transgender young people attempt to take their own life. And I fell into that and attempted to take my own life. And once again, it was never not accepting who I was. It was not being able to accept the fact that the world wouldn't accept who I was. And ultimately, I didn't actually know who I was at that moment in time. At 15 years old, I didn't actually know kind of who I was. And the names that I were being called didn't actually feel like they were my labels. So I essentially attempted to take my own life, and clearly that was just a cry for help. And fortunately, that cry for help was heard, and I was taken to the doctors by my mum, and my mum essentially got me a sick note for school, and the doctor said it's not safe for your child to go to school. So I walked into school with my sick note and I showed my headmaster this sick note. And I remember at the time my headmaster said to my mum, well, maybe if your son didn't wear so much makeup, he wouldn't get bullied. So I was horrified for two reasons. First of all, I felt like I was being blamed for being bullied. And the second reason was I didn't realize anyone knew I was wearing makeup because I thought I was being really subtle. I just thought a bit of concealer, a bit of mascara, maybe a bit of brow gel and a bit of gloss. And clearly that was quite a lot for somebody that was assigned male at birth. But I was essentially just doing what all of the other young girls in the school were doing. And that was to try and make myself feel more attractive to me and to feel more me. Because I never essentially was trying to make myself look more. I was essentially just trying to make myself feel more myself. So I left school at 15, and sadly, the education authority and my mum let me down. And I wasn't homeschooled at all, and I wasn't entered into any exams. So I gained no qualifications, no GCSEs. So at the age of 16, I then did what any slightly extrovert, unqualified person would do and enrolled in Performing Arts College. And it was between the age of 16 and 17 where I really started to kind of embrace my own identity and really started to look inwards and kind of, experiment with kind of who I wanted to present myself to the outside world. It was also between the ages of 16 and 17. I committed some serious crimes against fashion. And ultimately, I was doing what many young people did at kind of a really, really young age. And wearing kind of, and pushing the boundaries of kind of what gender meant to them. And I now look back and realize a tulle skirt probably wasn't acceptable for a day at college, but actually it was just me kind of really experimenting how I felt comfortable. So at the age of 17, I left Performing Arts College and had started going to nightclubs and had started going to gay nightclubs. And I'd started kind of seeing people that felt like my people. And you have to understand that when I was 15 in 1996, the internet wasn't a thing. I know, shock horror, right? But ultimately, people didn't have easy access to the internet. And the only people that I really saw in the media that were kind of gender queer were drag queens like Lily Savage. Most of you won't know who Lily Savage is, but I will say maybe someone like Bimini Bombulash or somebody like Taste for those of you that watch Drag Race. But essentially, they were drag queens. And then the other people that I would see in the media were the headline stories, such as, you know, army sergeant in sex swap scandal. So I couldn't really see somebody that was like me anywhere. And once again, that was really isolating. And it wasn't until I started going to gay nightclubs where I started seeing people that I could essentially identify with. And at the age of 17, I met somebody who was transgender. And it was like in the movies where the clouds separate and the lights come down and you hear, ha, because I suddenly realized I wasn't the only person like me in the world. I suddenly realized that I wasn't the only person that was part of the LGBT plus community that was having to commit to a box that didn't feel right for me. So I then came out as transgender after coming out as gay at the age of 15. And as you would imagine, after already coming out to my Grimbarian family at 15 as a gay man, I was like, actually, I was wrong. So there were some kind of eye rollings and there were some situations where people didn't understand. So I want to fast forward a few years, and I had fully transitioned, so socially transitioned, which meant that I was presenting as female all the time, and I had started to go out to nightclubs more, and I started to realize that actually this potentially could be a space where I could find employment. So I started to work behind bars in gay nightclubs, and that felt like a safe space for me. But once again, the challenge that I was having is that I was working in gay nightclubs, and even then, I was still one of very few transgender people. So I couldn't actually identify how I could fit into, and I hate saying this word, but the normal world. I couldn't identify how I could slot into a corporate environment and be myself. And Ria will vouch for me. I'm not very good at being anybody other than me, because I don't have a filter, because I think, you know, I think we can waste a lot of energy trying to be somebody else, and it takes a lot of energy to be me. So I just don't have any left to try and be anybody else. And the challenge that I was faced with is that I couldn't see where else I could go other than gay nightlife. So I became a drag queen, and I was known for 10 years as Isabella Was a Fella, and I was infamous on the whole gay scene. I mean, granted, it was only like 2 bars, but I was still infamous. I felt like the Lady Gaga of Hull for quite a few years. But I realized that actually, being a drag queen was, first of all, absolutely exhausting. So for anybody that is thinking that drag is like an easy ride, it's really not. Because essentially I was being paid to socialize, and was having to go out and enjoy myself 5 nights a week. Now, I know to many students, you'd be like, I can do that easily. But as I was starting to get into my mid to late 20s, it wasn't as easy as that. So I started to think about what I could potentially do to have a normal job, and I use that term lightly. So I actually applied for a role in a telephone communications company, and as a lady with quite a deep voice, it probably wasn't a good idea for me back then to be working on the telephones, because I was constantly being misgendered, which was hugely triggering. However, what I did realize is that actually I had more in me, and I was capable of more than just being a loudmouth northern drag queen. So I started to kind of to explore a career outside of drag, and I remember within about 3 weeks of working in this telephone communications company. And this would be in probably 2008. So I still think that is quite recent. And I know that is a long time ago for young people, but still, you know, in the noughties. And within a few weeks of me working in this this telephone communications company, the HR representative called me into the office and they said, Sionice, we need to talk to you about the toilets. And I'd only worked in gay nightclubs for 10 years. And, you know, men's and women's toilets in gay nightclubs aren't really a thing because everyone just goes to the toilet. So I really wasn't expecting what came. And my response was, well, I'm glad you've brought it up because the toilet seat in cubicle 3 always pinches my bottom because it's got a crack in it. And the window's always open, so it's always really cold. And they looked at me deadpan and said, no, we don't want you to use the women's toilets because we think people might be upset. So we want you to use the disabled toilets. And that was the first time I realized that I was going to have to stand up for myself, and that the corporate world wasn't where it needed to be. So I mean, I very quickly kind of made everybody know who I was and made everybody love me. And very quickly HR was being told by the rest of the building that actually I wouldn't be using the disabled toilets. But there was always that kind of feeling of being othered in that business, and in a negative way. When I was trained to use a new system in that company, I discovered that the person that trained me was asked, do you mind training Sionice because she's transgender? So I think for me that was a kind of a real eye opener. And then when I joined Barclays 14 years ago, we had an LGBT network, and we were pro LGBT. So that was a real kind of like refreshing moment for me. And joining the bank, full disclosure, I had spent 10 years as a drag queen and was all of a sudden working in a bank. So there was a little bit of a culture shock for me. And I repeatedly say the only reason I didn't get fired was because my best friend was my assistant manager, because I still didn't realize that actually, you know, some of my language wasn't particularly professional, and I couldn't dress up the branch-based corporate wear with like neon headscarves and things. So I kind of, you know, I needed some navigating into how I fit into the corporate world. But what I realized very quickly is that I did fit into that corporate world. So during my career, my 14-year career in Barclays, I've had some ups and downs as a transgender individual. I had a line manager tell me that I needed to stop banging the transgender drum because she thought of me as a woman, and so did my team. So therefore, I didn't need to bang the drum anymore. I've also in one occasion had to tell my line manager how to record my sickness when I was having gender reassignment surgery. And I felt like all of the way I very much had to be the expert in my field, because I was the first ever openly transgender person within Barclays UK. I was the first ever transgender bank manager in the UK. And whilst it's great to have those badges on your, you know, your brownie sash, once again, it can still take me into that feeling of isolation, because we all need role models to look up to. We all need people that we can actually see them and say, right, that person is this kind of person and they've achieved that, so therefore so can I. And what I'd realized is that I was having to be that person for myself. So I think, you know, I've given you kind of a bit of an insight to my journey up to Barclays. I'm now going to kind of flip on its head a little bit and just give you a bit of a kind of career insight into how I've got to the position that I've got to now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some of my golden nuggets. So you better have your pens and papers handy, because these, I think, are really key things that I wish that I'd have known at a young age. And I wish that somebody had told me to start thinking about at your age. So what I realized really quickly in a big organization is kind of your unique selling point is also your ultimate superpower. And I love cheesy lines. So if I could have like badges for all my cheesy lines, I would have a whole t-shirt full of badges. But the reason I point this out is, it's really easy to think that, oh, I am this kind of person, so therefore I can't achieve those things. And it's really important that you understand that actually what makes you unique is also what makes you unique. And ultimately, especially if you're working in a large company, your voice is super important, because the business needs to hear from unique people to be able to make decisions that include all kinds of people. I quite quickly realized that whilst it's important for when you step into a business, whilst it's important for you to fit in that business, it's actually more important for that business to fit you. Because if you change too much to be like the business, ultimately across all levels of the business, you'll just have loads of clones, and the business won't be successful, and they won't make successful decisions. So I have always been really authentic at work, and I've always been really passionate about talking to my audience, regardless of their seniority, about my journey. And you should see the senior directors that I speak to when I tell them my drag name, the look of horror and delight that they've got somebody talking to them and influencing that used to be a drag queen, but also delighted because they're speaking to somebody that is unique. And that has really helped me throughout all of my journey, because I've kind of brought something different and something fresh. One of the key things that I learned throughout my journey is that actually each interaction that you have is an opportunity to build a network. And something that really catapulted my career was in 2011, when I'd had my gender reassignment surgery. I wanted to basically tell the company how much of a great support I'd felt from them. And I wanted to tell people from within the company, actually, if they're experiencing something similar, to not be afraid, and to know that actually that Barclays is there to support them. So I wrote to our internal communications magazine, and within minutes of me putting down the phone to the editor of our magazine, I had the chair of our LGBT network on the phone to me saying, "Sionice, we need your help, because nobody else in the UK identifies as transgender, and we've got all of these amazing things that we want to work on, but we don't have anybody to bounce the ideas off without the fear of making a mistake." So I very quickly became a consultant, and I very quickly was talking to lots and lots of different people. And what I realized is each one of those people was an opportunity for me to build a relationship. So as you start thinking about your next steps, whether that be to continue to study or to go into the business, the one thing that I would really encourage you to be thinking about straight away is, how can you make a big network? How can you create that network? And that can be an internal network and an external network. You're already doing so with your committee within the university, which is great. But actually, start to think about how you can connect with people externally, and certainly when you go into your professional environments, start to think how you can immediately start to have those conversations and start to build that network. Because each time I've made a career step, it's always been off the back of a conversation with somebody within my network. So kind of my career journey traveled in a straight line for quite a long time. So I moved from a cashier. I was in that role for a couple of years, and then I moved into the role of a moment banker. So essentially, I was serving customers, helping them identify their product needs. Then I moved into an assistant manager role, and then, like I said, the first transgender bank manager in the UK. I then realised that the branch that I was working in was a challenge, and it was a challenge for many reasons. But I wasn't getting the support I needed in that role. And this is another key nugget of information I wish that I'd have known sooner. And sometimes that is, you can take a side step or even a backwards step if what you are doing doesn't fit. So I think sometimes when we step into the professional environment, we think, right, every step has got to be a step up and a step forward. And actually, what that can do is that can put us in this position where we feel trapped by the role that we're in because we can't see the next role up. And what I did is, after spending probably 2 years in a branch that was crippling me. I was understaffed. There were some cultural issues that I couldn't overcome within the branch, and essentially I took a step back into a quieter branch to give me some time to reflect and to start giving me some time to actually start working on the things that I wanted to be working on, side of desk stuff. I was really, really fortunate that then 4 years ago, I saw a step up, and it was a role within our regulated industry. So it was essentially leading a team of mortgage advisors in the northwest of London. And it was a huge change for me. And I had to have a professional qualification. Now, I'd never studied for a qualification. I had to ask my husband how to study. And my husband is a teacher and was very directive, and told me what I was doing was sufficient. And essentially, I passed, and I managed a team of mortgage advisors for 4 years in a regulated industry. And what that really did to me is it made me realize that I could do more, and it was really empowering for me. And I think what I did in 2021 was something that I once again would really encourage you to have as a key takeaway from this session, and that is career planning. So in 2021, I'd done the role that I was studying for. I'd done the role that I was doing at the time for 4 years, and I'd become stagnant. I wasn't, I wasn't thinking creatively. I wasn't as passionate about doing that role as I had been at the beginning. And I started to think about kind of the steps that I wanted to take to progress my career. And I knew that I wanted to work in diversity and inclusion. I joined our LGBT Networks Executive Committee, and I was leading on a few things for that committee. But ultimately, I wanted to work for in D&I for my day job. So I started to think about who the key people in my network were that could really give me insight into what it meant to work in D&I. But I also started planting seeds in those networks. So by career planning, I'd initially thought that I would need to take a side step, because in the role that I had, I didn't feel like I had strategy, which is a key skill in diversity and inclusion. I didn't feel like I had experience of strategy. So ultimately, what I was thinking I would need to do was to take a side step at the same grade, which was the role that I was in at present, which was an assistant vice president. And I felt like I needed to take a side step to add that skill set to my skills. And this is where kind of your career planning can really come into play, because if you see yourself in a position in 5 years, 10 years time, I'd really encourage you to think about kind of the skills that you will need, the transferable skills, but also like the soft skills, the hard skills that you will need for that role. And don't necessarily think that there's only a straight line for that role. because quite often what you will find is lots of different side steps will ultimately build those skills for you to make that big step into that big role. And in 2021, I decided that I wanted to work for diversity and inclusion. So I'd reached out to several people that were already working in diversity and inclusion. And I'd said to them, hey, I'm Sionice. And they were all already knew who I was and were like, yeah, we know Sionice. But ultimately, what I was also doing is I was saying, I want to work with you on things. And I was creating the environment that they felt like I was already part of their team. So I was having regular catch-ups, I was having regular conversations. So when those roles were becoming available, I already knew about them. And because I'd had some brilliant conversations with fairly senior leaders within diversity and inclusion, what they'd really helped me do is understand that some of the stuff that I was already doing was very, very transferable into a diversity and inclusion role, and ultimately was I was already ready. I was there. So last year I applied for the BUK Diversity and Inclusion lead role, which, much to my amazement, I got. And ultimately, kind of, I am now a vice president in a multinational global bank and I'm also frequently the face of the bank for diversity and inclusion globally on our social media. If you check out LinkedIn, I recently did a post for International Women's Day for them. And I think kind of what makes me really, really proud about that is that I feel like I really, really early on in my career realized that actually I can either challenge the status quo and be part of the movement to get the bank where it needs to be, or I can look for a business where that status quo doesn't need to be challenged and where it's already there. And I think that's kind of, one of the things that I would hope that you're already thinking about is when you're looking for your next position, whether it be another university or whether it be actually to step into the world of careers, really think about who you want to work for. Think about the morals of the company. Think about what your values are, and don't chase money, because believe me, if you're unhappy in your role and you're not fulfilled, no money in the world will make you successful. So kind of my key tips for stepping into the career world are: look at the companies that you're looking for, look at kind of their policies that you are passionate about. So look at their gender pay gap, look at their ethnicity pay gap if they publish it, look at their D&I policies, look at their social media, look at who they have representing their brand, and if it's not ethnically diverse, if it's not diverse in the LGBT arena, and you think those things are important to you, make a decision on whether or not you want to go into those businesses and change the status quo and be part of the movement, or actually whether or not you want to go somewhere where it's more developed. I feel like I've spoken for absolutely ages, which my husband is fully used to, but I'm just wondering whether or not there are any questions for me.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much, and it's really great to hear about your story, and it's amazing to see the impact you've had on everyone, and just the great influence you've had to change everything for the better. I'm gonna allow the others to ask any questions. So if you two like to ask anything first.
Hiya. I don't have any questions, but I just want to say it was really lovely to hear your story and how you've progressed and what you had to face in the beginning of your journey and to where you are now. I just want to say it's just really inspiring, and it was so I don't want to say nice to hear, but it's good to see how much everything's changed.
Indeed. And I think, Rosie, honestly, I think it would be really remiss of me to not highlight the fact that the transgender community is under attack so much at the moment, not only in the UK but globally. And I think it's a real challenge to not allow that to impact you. And I think, you know, we hear so much about not allowing, don't take your emotions to work, and I think you know, as you step into the career world, you will hear that, you know, and especially if you step into a really corporate environment, you'll see people being more, so whatever that more is. So if that, you know, if they're a woman in the workplace, they'll become more masculine, you know, and if they're an ethnically diverse person, they might start covering some of their cultural things, so they're being more white. And that's really, really dangerous, because actually we're human beings, and and we, whether we like it or not, we're led by our emotions. So I quite often cry at work. I'm a terrible crier. But I think that's really important, because I don't want people to think that I'm not feeling emotions, because I'm led by my emotions a lot of the time. And I think, you know, allowing the space at work for me to talk about the things that is happening in the transgender community is a really, really important part of the culture. And I think it's the same with kind of with anything. If something is impacting you and you don't feel like you can bring that to work, ultimately you're wasting energy on covering that emotion. So I think that's, I wanted to flag that. But then also, I also really think it's really important. Like, for me, being transgender is a huge privilege, and I don't think a lot of people really ever get that until they're an old bird like me. But I have a lot of joy, and I have a lot of trans joy. Being transgender for me has allowed me to be part of things that I would never have been part of if I wasn't transgender. First of all, it shaped me, who I am. You know, the complications that I had through surgery, and ultimately nearly losing my life on 2 separate occasions, made me really embrace life and made me realize I need to live for the moment. Being transgender is making me 100% a better parent to my stepson, because I am consciously having those conversations with him to make sure that he doesn't turn into one of the bullies that bullied me. So actually, whilst it can suck at times being transgender, and you know, and there are laws and policies being made that are deliberately to exclude us, actually I also see a huge positive in being transgender, and I feel privileged to be transgender. I always say I feel sorry for the cisgender people, and that's an absolute joke, but I genuinely feel like I'm in a position, an enlightened position, and I feel really lucky.
That's so lovely, thank you.
I would actually, sorry.
Oh.
I would actually like to say something. Firstly, sorry I cannot have my camera on. I'm
It's
not
okay.
well at the moment.
Oh, bless you.
But one thing I wanted to say is that the number one thing that I have gotten out of this meeting is that never stop fighting for what you believe in. You know, this is a success story, and you know, it shows that you never once, there's so many of these obstacles that you have faced, but never once did you conform to what they wanted or what the norm was. You pushed yourself out, and you ended up succeeding compared all those bullies who bullied you are probably, you know, they're nowhere as where you are now. And that's to just show that never stop fighting for what you want. And thank you so much for this motivation, because in
Thank
life
you.
we always have these things like this where there's always obstacles, and people just a lot. As an international student, you know, there's always some kind of obstacle, and these are stuff that says that never stop. If you believe in something and you want to push your way through, believe in yourself, and you will reach where you want to reach when the time comes. So thank you so much for this talk. I really appreciated it.
Thank you so much. And is it Shahana? Is that how I pronounce it?
Yes, this
Brilliant.
is Shahana.
Brilliant. Thank you, Shahana. I love that you've taken that away, because you know, I talked at the beginning about your unique selling point being your unique superpower, and I genuinely believe that, and I genuinely feel that more and more people need to understand how powerful they are, and more people need to understand what they can achieve in the world. And I don't just mean, you know, in the university, in the workplace, in genuinely in the world. And I think that can be as big as, you know, blow my own trumpet here, but being the face of Barclays Pride last year, I was on all of their ATMs. I was massive in Times Square on the big screen, which was quite ironic because I'd also put on as much weight as I've ever done in my life. And I was like, of all the times to blow me up to that size, but, you know, but whether it be as big as, you know, being the face of the transgender community for Barclays, or whether it be just making sure that your child is thinking really inclusively, that is making a huge impact. So you know, really encourage you to reflect on the impacts that you can make on the world, and how big and small those things can look like. Thank you, Shahana.
So I have a question. What is one thing that you'd like to see, no matter how big or small the organisations are? What's the one thing you'd like to see from them most in 5 years' time to make sure that they are ensuring that all employees in their organisation are being looked after?
Oh, great question, crikey! Right, let's think, because I've got a list. So I think for me, and I'm trying to keep it as broad as possible with kind of inclusion in mind. But I think, you know, I have a vested interest, and I'm a trans woman, and I'm a binary trans woman, so I identify as female. But a huge part of my trans community are non-binary. And I think that the systems in the world are just not set up to fully accept and fully include non-binary people. Some countries you can choose MX on your passport. Some countries you can be non-gender on legal documentation. In the UK, we're not there. Even within my own organization, there are some systems that are exclusive to non-binary people, and I feel like it's disrespectful and delegitimizing their experience of gender. And whilst I am very fortunate that I can tick a box now that says I'm female, I can't imagine how that must feel to have an application form or to see, you know, my gender on a legal system and it not actually be how I feel. So I think my vested interest would have to say kind of inclusion and kind of, I'm not saying that we need to break down gender totally, but I do think that we just unnecessarily gender things, don't we? And we ram this toxic gendering down people's throats, which means that children don't feel like they can, little boys don't feel like they can play with girls' toys, and little girls don't feel like they can play with trucks, and then that can cause problems because they don't understand their own identity sometimes, and sometimes that can lead to children thinking that they have issues with their gender, and actually all they've got an issue with is they just want to play with a girl's toy. So yeah, ending kind of toxic gendering and unnecessary gendering of like fashion and stuff like that. But then like fully inclusive technology across all systems, across all companies, across the world.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm really glad you picked up on one point about the system, because I did my dissertation, my undergraduate studies about diversity management in organisations, and I completely agree. There is need of a change in the system. And you know, we all need to be equal together to make it work.
And the thing is, Callum, is the problem is it's so systemic that we can't do it unless we all do it. So for instance, some systems in the banking systems pull data from the credit reference agency systems and then link into, for instance, if you have a bank, if you have a large corporate bank that that offers insurance products. They won't necessarily design those insurance products themselves. They will have an external provider. So if you then have a bank that is saying, right, okay, we're going to allow you to choose non-binary as a gender option, and then you then offer a protection policy through your system, that protection policy then doesn't offer the non-binary option, you've then got that mismatch. So it's the impact of all of those different systems not working at the same time. So we basically have to have a massive culture change. And I think that will be driven by policy and by lawmakers. But yes, I'm not going to start talking about the government. Not allowed.
I completely agree with you, though. For when I did my research and what you've just mentioned, I completely agree with you. And you know, it's great to see the changes that have already happened. It's great to see the awareness, you know, of continuous year. Well, I shouldn't say year by year. I should say day by day, really, because you know things are always changing so fast all the time. It is only getting better and better, and fingers crossed, you know, that will keep on continuing to happen. That kind of leads me to my next question. In terms of, because you mentioned about teaching your stepson everything, do you feel in terms of the education side, I'd probably say more towards maybe primary and high school, middle school, whatever preference you like to call it, do you feel there needs to be more taught about everything? I remember back when, because I'm nearly 25, so there was excuse me, there was nothing taught to me about anything at all, and I feel like it's, you know, it's something that really should be, you know, starting to get taught towards you know, the generation today.
So I'm just plugging my phone in because I've talked for so long, even my phone is dying on me. So I mean, when I went to school, and I didn't realise this until very recently, when I went to school, Section 28 was in force. So for those of you that don't know, Section 28 was a law that was passed by the government that basically was very similar to the Don't Say Gay bill that's going on in Texas, I think. Ultimately, the school, it was illegal for the school to teach young people about LGBT people. So you've already heard what happened to me. You've already heard the dangers that actually children not knowing other people like them exist can do to them, but also other children around them not knowing people like those exist. So the short answer is, does more need to be done? Absolutely. The long answer is that there are loads of organizations now that are doing it, loads of kind of, you know, of charities that are trying to do it. But I still have an issue with the fact that it needs to be charities and organizations that are doing it, and not just kind of it's part of the curricula. You know, we talk about history in schools, like LGBT history, queer history is hugely inspiring and it's absolutely brilliant and wonderful. And, you know, but not just LGBT history, Black history, you know, Indian history. There is so much rich history that we could be teaching our children that would really be helping them understand other people exist. Other people exist. So, and this isn't just about kind of, I always say we need to get to a position where people understand that not everybody is like them, and they don't feel the need to really understand somebody before they can respect it. So a lot of people say to me, oh, I'd really like you to come and do a session so we can understand what it means to be transgender. And I say to them, well, if you can understand what it means to be transgender, you're doing better than I can, because I don't understand what it means to be transgender. I know what it means to be me, but I don't understand what it fully means to be transgender. So if you're waiting to fully understand before you start showing that community respect, then you'll never get there. So what we just need to do is we just need to know other people exist and actually treat that difference with curiosity, with genuine intent, positive intent. I want to learn about you. So if I come across somebody else like you in the future, I can be in a great position to support that person. And that's what we need to do with our children. We need to help our children understand that not everybody is like them. Not everybody has the background that they've experienced. Not everybody believes the same things that they believe. But that doesn't mean that you can't be friends with them. It doesn't mean you can't play with them. It doesn't mean you can't respect them. There are some brilliant resources out there. So I've actually used a couple of books with my stepson to help my conversation with him. So I've been married to Ruben's dad now for 5 years. We've been together for 7. We got together when he was 2 years old, and I'd not spoken to him about being transgender until last year. And that was terrifying for me, because I was like, oh crikey, what if he thinks I'm weird? So and those kind of conversations, you know, I needed to have with him to really like finalize our bond. But I was also terrified that what if he goes to school and they start saying my mum's transgender, and then start to get bullied. All of this PTSD coming back from my school experiences. But what the books enabled me to do is to say to him, Ruben, people like this exist. Oh, and I'm one of them. Rather than saying, Ruben, surprise, trans people exist and I'm one. It was a facilitator for us to have a great conversation. And the brilliant thing is that it also enabled him to ask questions of me, but through the book. So by saying things like, well, if that parent didn't decide to tell their child until their child was 8 years old, what about that? And he was essentially saying, why haven't you told me? But without it being confrontational. So that was a long answer, Callum. I'm very aware of that. I'm sorry, but hopefully it answered your question.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And then, you know, I completely agree. No, that's great. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
I realise we are coming on to time, so I'd just like to take any final questions you'd like to ask from anyone else here this evening. No? Okay. Oh, Bria?
I was going to say I don't have any questions, but thank you so much for coming, Sionice. Like, I didn't even realise until you mentioned about time how long you'd been talking for. Like, I could listen to you for hours. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for inviting me. And listen, I think it's important to acknowledge, you know, you people are our future leaders. So having conversations like this, stirring up these kind of thought processes in people of your age will mean that in the future it will get better for diverse people of all different minorities. So, you know, we're really proud of what you're doing, and just make sure that you are taking action and you're not just listening to these conversations and going great and then not taking action.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I would also like to thank everyone who's come along for this evening, and for anyone who may be watching this later on our social media channels. And if you did have any further questions or anything else we can do to help, please feel free to email us at any time. And thank you ever so much again for coming along this evening. It has been an absolute pleasure listening to you with your story, the advice you've given us, and again, the superpower part. That's the one bit I really, really like, and I hope there is something that someone can take away from the conversation we've all had this evening.
Lovely.
The recording session is now going to stop. If I can find the button.
That's not really me.